Hi, I'm Jeannie Ann Curington, and I'm going to be interviewing J.R. Garcia today. He is of Mexican American descent, and he's in his 30s. He has a bachelor degree from Prairie View A&M, and he is a tennis professional. He's considered the director of tennis at the club that he works at. And so our first question, JR, is describe the most important values and beliefs of your culture.
Things that I think about or come to mind would be faith, loyalty, honesty, and loving and caring for family. Faith, we are big into church and prayer. We love to spread the word and make sure that our other family members or extended family are prayed for and cared for. We use the sign of the cross quite a bit. We are of Catholic. We use Catholic majority of the time. Most Mexican American are Catholic. Our family, all of my family is Catholic, so that is we use a lot of Catholic holidays and celebrations throughout the year. For loyalty, it's a lot of unity within our families. There's a lot of extended families. Our cousins are nieces and our nephews are all considered brothers and sisters. Even friends of our family are considered like brothers and sisters, and we take care of them like they're our own. We love and care for everyone as well, like I said, through family, and it's our world.
Great, thank you. All right, please describe important cultural events, celebrations, and practices in your culture.
There are a lot of different ones, but the ones that I mainly stick to, our family mainly stick to, are 16 de September, and which is funny because it's also my niece's birthday. So it's the 16th of September. It's Mexican Independence Day. We also celebrate Cinco de Mayo, and it's a little bit more of an American type of fun play, but it's always one of those that we get to use our colors and our floral decorations and dances that they can be proud of and familiarized with if you're not too familiar with. Our birthdays and anniversaries are really important to our families. We use a lot of decorations that are a little bit more colorful, and we have piñatas that we use, and we use have a lot of candy in there for the kids, so they get really excited about that. Dancing, we have a lot of dances in those celebrations, and if you're not a dancer, it's okay because everybody still likes to party.
Okay, so what about some reading material, films, or videos that we could use to learn more about your culture?
So my favorite one recently is Coco. It's an awesome family and children's movie. It celebrates Dia de los Muertos, which we also celebrate as a family culturally, and that's more of a remembrance of memory of those who passed before us. It's a fun movie. There's a lot of laughing and dancing and playing of music. There's a lot of folklore music that's used, like mariachi music that's used in that movie, and it's neat to see how it was depicted or used, our cultural used in that movie to familiarize more people with it. And I think I find a lot of my friends who really like that movie because of the music and because of the dancing and the message behind it. I think a lot of that message was just finding life, but when the little boy Miguel is finding life or finding who his father is and who he wants to know who the family is, he always goes back and reflects, or at the very end he reflects on himself, that he's always been right there with my family. And that's a Mexican culture, is they're always by family. Another good movie would be Spanglish. It's one of my favorites because it's a fun movie. It's not a really fun movie. It's kind of sad, but it shows the fight that some Mexicans who aren't legal or who are legal and have a tough time finding work because of their skin color or their nationality or the way they wear their clothes or differences in clothing like that. finding hard work or finding work is difficult for them, but it shows the perseverance that that family has and that they put forth for the little girl in that movie. A funny one is Fools Rush In. It shows a lot of our traditional signs from God and church. It's really neat because I spoke with my wife about it as well, and I think it's one of my personal favorites. But it has a lot of signs that you're like, wow, you know what? God is always around. Life is there, and we live it, and we're very we read into signs a lot. So that's a good movie to watch and examine. And then another family favorite is La Bamba. The music. It's always a good one. It shows a lot of, where people come from and how hard, if they work hard enough, where they can get to. And it's difficult for those who don't have those same feelings of that they can make it. So hopefully some of those movies kind of push others to push above and beyond.
Cool. Great. Okay, how do you think others outside your culture view your culture?
That's a tricky one because I tend to hang around with people who accept me for who I am. I don't normally put my culture out there unless they ask for it or if they're willing to go with me to family gatherings. I think people have a view of if you're not the same skin color, you just think differently, so it's always going to be something that you're maybe not agreeing with, but some people have to be more open to other cultures and other people's skin color and understanding, oh, that's what you do, I like that. That's what you do, I don't like that, but I don't have to say it and be mean about it or anything like that. Right. The view that most Mexicans probably would feel is they look down upon. We don't always have the best jobs in the world, but they work really hard and they work a lot of hours. And I think the dirtiness, the grit that they show in the type of work that they may be doing isn't always as fashionable, isn't always as styling that other people can see. So I think we get looked down upon through that action. Luckily enough, I've found myself in a successful business of tennis, so I'm always dressed prim and proper. So I don't always get looked down on, but I do have a sense of feeling of where I'm at, and depending on where the place is at where I'm teaching at, there's always little mixed feelings like, okay, you might be involved with tennis, but you can't tell me what to do, and it's difficult. It's a tricky one, but I know who those people are, right, and we shy away. And I think that's the bigger part with some misconceptions or some views is we tend to, as different minority cultures, we tend to shy away from people who may not understand or may not want to understand.
What are some of your fondest memories from your childhood?
Food. One of my favorite childhood memories is atole, the arroz, which is what my grandmother used to make every morning. Well, I'd say 3 out of the 5 mornings that I would spend with her throughout the summer. It's basically rice pudding, and it has cinnamon sticks, and it's like a oatmeal-ish type of breakfast. One of my favorite memories is always waking up hearing her clank the dishes in the morning, probably about 5 a.m., and you're like, oh, I don't want to get up, but we got up because the roosters were crowing. So we would get up, eat breakfast, hang out with our grandfather, and more than likely work in the yard, and then probably turn in at about 9:30 to go take a nap, my brother and I. Another favorite childhood memory is my grandmother as well. She would rub an egg in prayer. If we felt ill, if we felt bad, if we weren't feeling good, it's called a curatera, where basically I would tell my grandmother, curame, and that means pray for me if I'm not feeling well, I'm sick. And what my grandmother would do was she'd take a cold egg from the fridge, and start her prayer, and she would rub the egg all throughout the outside of your body, and that was a way of prayer to get the evil spirits or to get the evil feelings out of your body through the egg. And at the end of the prayer, she would actually crack the egg in a bowl, put it underneath the bed, and if the egg cooked, it was supposedly meant to mean that the evil spirits were in there and that they got out. If the egg didn't cook, it's okay. It still accepted all the evil spirits, and we would throw the egg away afterwards. So that was always a fun and loving childhood memory, and it was a great way of continuing religion outside of church. My grandfather, we would go with him. We'd spend it on the ranches. He was a foreman for a ranch. He would tend to a lot of equipment and yards and animals and on people's ranches. So we'd always be a helping hand with extra gloves with him, and whether it was hay, feed, mowing, weeds, stones, whatever it may be, we just kind of did it with him, and that was his way of bonding with us, spending the time with us. He was a tough man. He would yell at us often if we weren't acting right. And then trips to the river. We, as a family, my family back home wasn't always the wealthiest, but we found ways to enjoy and spend time together at the river, and it was perfect because it was 15 minutes away. So we'd all pack in a big van, and one of those Chevy Astro vans back in the day. Probably about 7 of us inside that van, and we all enjoyed it. And then it was getting better and better each year, because then the van started adding volume and music controls in the back. So they weren't crazy about that, but it was fun. And then I think like another fond one would be my grandfather always making barbacoa, which is a type of meat from cow. He would make a hole in the yard and cook it that way, and then he would also make pots of beans, huge pots of beans. So that was always fun.
Cool. Okay, have you ever experienced any prejudice or discrimination?
Yes. Unfortunately. And what's crazy is you accept it as it goes along, because we don't know any better. Or not that we don't know any better, it's just common. I get a lot of like, can you speak Spanish to somebody else, because I don't know how to communicate with them. The communication is always funny to me, because I think it's funny because a lot of Mexicans actually know English. Whether they can speak it well or correctly, I think that's where Mexicans and Mexican Americans could shy away from me more often, because they don't want to get it incorrect. They don't want to be made fun of. Vice versa, Anglo doesn't want to speak Spanish because they don't want to be made fun of, like the way they say it, especially in front of Hispanic or Mexican friends. I got called a spig in high school, and almost got into a big fight because of it. It was one of those things that I beat another friend of mine at something silly, and he got upset, and that was his way of lashing out. And I think that was the first time that I've ever really, really gotten angry about it. I've heard it before, never really paid attention to it, but I think that one hurt me the most because it was a friend. And we've moved past it, and I'm actually still decently connected to him. We're not of great standing, but we do deal with each other every so often still. I've gotten called an effing Mexican, whether it's moving, people feeling like they had a right before me, or vice versa. The most recent one was inside of my neighborhood, probably about 4 months ago. I was walking my dog, and my dog got off the leash, and a neighbor a couple streets down yelled at me and told me I didn't belong in this neighborhood. And I looked at him and I was like, I'm sorry. And what's funny was I'm Mexican, and I'm wearing my Prairie View A&M tennis hoodie. So I wasn't like in the best dressed clothing in the neighborhood, but I wasn't also in rags. I was, in a college hoodie and shorts, and it's tough because I'm Hispanic, and then Prairie View is historically black college. It is,
Right.
90% or more right now of African Americans. And I only say 90% now because there's a lot more Hispanics and Anglos actually going into that school as of lately, which is amazing because people don't open their eyes to knowing schools like that unless they're of that descent or that ethnicity. After that instance, I actually told the man, I was like, I'm sorry you feel that way, and I hope you can figure something out with your life, because obviously that's not my problem, but it's one of those things that when people do have problems, they're more vocal about it lately.
Right. Definitely. Okay, so given what's happened in recent events, what do you think can be done about prejudice and discrimination?
Respect. More respect. Just plain it. There's a lot of disrespectful comments and just ideas that are thrown out there in the world. There's biggest problem, I think, internet. It's the easiest and the fastest way people can get to each other, whether it's on the nerves or help each other. So it's a double-edged sword. Interviews on internet or articles on internet or even your own views on internet, there's so many hurtful things that people can say, and it's out of lack of respect. I mean, that's just plain it. You can make a comment and you can make it respectful, disagreeing or arguing maybe your point of view, but it's always one of those things. It's just always going to come down to respect. It's doing to others as you'd like for them to do to you.
Right. What do you think is the biggest misconception about your culture?
That we're not hardworking and that we're worthless, or that we just want to accept free handouts. Most Mexicans don't want free handouts. Always a certain percentage in every race and every culture that would love to live, scot-free without having to pay for things. But I don't believe that we or any culture is like that. Everybody knows they need to work. Everybody knows that they need to put forth the efforts to progress. I mean, that's just plain it. Everybody wants a better family. Everybody wants a better living situations, cars, clothes. I think the biggest misconception is that we don't earn our keep, so to speak.
Yeah.
I think another one would be that we can't speak English, or that others can't speak English. Again, I'll go back to the point where I made where most Mexicans will more than likely shy away from that situation because they don't want to be made fun of, and either that or B, they're going to go to their friends and make fun of you because they're like, I can't believe you just said that to me. But it happens, and it happens often. And that's the silly part, is when people get upset because of non-speaking Spanish, not being able to speak English, or not being able to speak Spanish, and they lash out. And it's a scary situation, honestly. And then that we're dangerous, that we use a lot of drugs, and that we're nothing but troublemakers or criminals. Again, it's come forth, especially within the past, anywhere between the past 2 to 5 years, that it's just uglier and uglier to how we portray certain cultures.
Okay, so as religious, ethnic, and cultural diversity increases in our society, what do you think schools can do to better prepare students to interact with others who are different than themselves?
That was a difficult one, and my only answer that I had at the time was to zap their brains before they go into school. They got to zap their brains, because a lot of it is it's learned from home. It's learned from home. It's learned from close to home. It may not be primarily inside of that household, but it's very close or very near. In the schools, I think, of course, some literature would help, but I think more team building, more where they have to do more of like a community service together. Community service is always a great way to put you back in your place, or to make you feel happier or grateful for the things that you have and that you own, that your family's got you, brought you up and provided for you. I think a lot more team building type of things where the kids interact more and more often in different types of communities. Whether it's nursing homes, whether it's parks, whether it's serving lines, whether anything like that, and even in like military or what do I want to call it, the VA hospitals.
Right.
It's a great place for kids to come together and understand that we're really not very far apart from each other. We may eat differently, we may pray differently, we may dress differently, but we're all the same. And I think that will help the respect levels, that'll help the caring for each other levels. In sports, that would help the sportsmanship.
Yeah, I was wondering about sports. And
that would help the sportsmanship.
Do you think sports pull the cultures together? Or
absolutely, because they have to work together. What I
Right.
mean? It's another part of teamwork where they have to really rely and depend on each other in times that they may not want to.
Right.
But then somebody steps up, and it could be a Mexican, it could be an African American, it could be an Anglo, it can be anybody that step up at that time and point where you're just like, wow, I didn't think you would help me in that situation, and then showing appreciation for that, showing and saying thank you
Yeah.
for helping me out in that situation, for all cultures and for all races.
All right.